and there are other kind of apprehensions also being made about extremism landing in India, etc. And so I thought that this topic, and since I work on gender issues and what is the role of women in peacekeeping scenario, so I'll be talking with you on this issue. Uh, the talk that I will give will be more of an informative talk on the development, the knowledge that I have worked on, the knowledge that I have gathered in the basically the few years that I'm working on this issue at international level. And so I would share some pointers on that. And since the title is Women Against Extremism and as Peace Builders, which means role of women in peace and countering extremism, there is this term CVE, which is countering violent extremism. So I am a part of this fellowship. I was awarded this fellowship by the United States government, and I visited various places in United States, various cities that have been working on this, and I have also been actively writing against extremism in every form, in its every form, in any religion, any scenario. So I'll be sharing that experience with you. And then I would also give a perspective on how gender, it's important to have a gender solution to this problem. What is the role of the female gender, and how it has been negated, and how it can be an important criteria to kind of control this menace, which doesn't seem to be decreasing anymore. It seems to be increasing in various forms, you know. So let me just start with the concept of peace. Let there be peace. Peace. I mean, peace is such a sweet word that we use. What does peace mean to us? You know, when we generally kind of try to understand it, it's basically a stress-free society or a state of security and calmness. No war, no conflict, coexistence, perfect harmony, and also when you feel with peace within yourself. So these are the variant understanding, or the understanding of peace. Now, coming to extremism, what is extremism? Now, extremism qualifies in itself as an advocacy or holding of an extreme measure or extreme view. I might have an extreme view on something, and that would not be liked by someone else. So that is also an extreme view. So extremism is not just terrorism and violence. It is also the thought of an extreme thought that might pacify me, but it will not. It is not in tandem with somebody else's thoughts. So there is a greater need to understand each other's diversity, each other's differences. So if there is an understanding of each other's diversity and each other's differences, when I say each other, it not just means human being. It also includes the animal world. It also includes the insects. It also includes the nature world. Now we are looking at the global warming threat. So, okay. So now coming to this. Violence and conflict affects the marginalized section of the society, which has always been this, that, you know, the concept violence, जिसको हम रश्मि मैम है यहाँ, violence and conflict. If there is conflict, if there is violence, it affects the marginalized section, जो हाशिए पे, the people who are on the marginalized section, and among them, the marginalized among marginalized are the women. The women are the most marginalized section of the society. Any society, if you see, not just, I mean, we cannot take Western society as an example and say they are quite, you know, advanced or whatever. They are still the most marginalized section of the society. And as per United Nations analysis, it's going to take another more than 1,000 years to have a equal society where men and women will be equal. For gender equality, we still need to fight another more than 1,000 years, and what you see what's happening in Afghanistan. So all the work, the efforts of all the activists and peace builders have gone down the drain the last 20-25 years. Now, peace starts at home. It is believed that peace starts at home. Women can be an empowered agent of change. Women can be an empowered agent of change. Empowered agent of change. Just listen, just imagine. I'm using three words. Empowered agent of change, women. The word empowered comes first. So we need to empower. But first and foremost, she should be in a decision making position, and that should begin from home. I always tell that the most important empowered feeling for a woman starts from her home. So it's the microcosm, you can say, the microcosm of a society is a family. So the family has to start empowering a woman, then only she can further work on it. Now there is this very interesting ripple effect challenge. My students are here, my friends are here. This is a very interesting concept of ripple effect challenge. When you throw a stone in the pond, there is this ripple that forms round and round. That stone has to start from the family. So the ripple effect, then it continues the empowerment of a woman. So there is this very interesting ripple effect challenge, and we all should work on this ripple effect challenge. Now, I'm going to refer to this report. I visited University of Maryland, and there's this organization which is called START. It's I think I will use the chat box for students. Okay, this is called START. If any students want to work on this, they can get to me, and I will share that report with you. This organization. It's called the Study of Terrorism and Response to Terrorism. So there's this organization funded by the American government. They're working on terrorism and the responses to terrorism. They have this latest report of 2019. The next report is coming, which refers to Global Terrorism Index. So you come to know the kind of extremism, and it gives you an index where. So India is nowhere. It doesn't fall in any of the extreme. There are other extremes that falls in India. Now, coming to gender and terrorism. See, when we are talking about women as peace builders, there is also, as per this report, there has also been an increase of women in terrorism. So let me just give you a brief analysis and introduction with some statistics. Between 2013 to 2018, incidents of female suicide attacks have increased. There were 4 in 2013, and in 2018 it is 22. 4 in 2013. Okay, and to see the increase, it's 22 in 2018. Now, is this empowerment of women? This is not related to empowerment of women, but rather it's related to the subjugation and exploitation of women, gender. Now, the most extreme contributors are the Boko Haram. I'm sure you must have heard about Boko Haram. The Boko Haram, they abduct the women, the girls, and they are made, they are forcibly put into terrorism and extremism. Now, the first notable rise of female suicide bombings, it occurred 1997 to 1999. This is a phase. 1997 to 1999, and the study of mine is based on the report that I quoted, the report that we have. I'll share it with you later. So the notable rise that we see is between 97 and 1999, and most of the incidents of female suicide bombers you have in Sri Lanka and Turkey. Okay, and the highest number of female suicide bombing you have is in the year 1999. Now, Cameroon and Nigeria have larger proportions of attacks committed by women because of the Boko Haram. I've already mentioned about the Boko Harams. Now, Russia, Iraq, Nigeria, Sri Lanka. Now, these are the countries where you have more of these incidents happening. Now, the next question definitely what will arise is why women get into terrorism. Okay, what is the reason? What is the reason that takes women towards terrorism? Violence, marriage, sexual violence, familial loss, conflict zones. We have so many conflict zones coming up all around the world, and these the conflict zones are, just to mention, conflict zone doesn't help. It's a hell for the women living in these conflict zone, women and children. There was this landmark resolution which was adopted by United Nations Security Council on 13th October 2015. Now, this resolution, it kind of recognized the linkages between countering terrorism, women, peace, and security. See, till by the year 2015, there was no understanding or no, you can say, linkage of women as peace builders. You know, gender as peace builders. There was only conflict. Still, it is still there, but the United Nations recognizes the linkages between countering terrorism and women and peace security. They recognize in 2015, it takes so many years for the UN to recognize that there has to be some kind of linkage where women, peace, and security can be used for countering terrorism, or CVE as I called it, countering violent extremism. On 1st November 2019, students, you should note these dates. On 1st November 2019, the CTC, that is the Countering Terrorism Committee of UN, CTC, it's the Countering Terrorism Committee of the United Nations. It held an open briefing at the United Nations headquarters on integrating gender into CVE, hashtag gender and countering terrorism. So this happens in 2019, 1st November, of integrating gender into countering violent extremism. That is the Countering Terrorism Committee of United Nations. Now, see why I gave you a background of rise of women in terrorism, because that is not related to gender empowerment. That is related to gender discrimination and the kind of oppression that women are facing. This is also that kind of oppression. So how do you make this peace building situation or integration of gender sensitive? How do you make it gender sensitive? I see some people raising their hands, so maybe we can just wait with the question till the end. Is it okay, Achin? Yeah, right? Okay. So gender sensitive. How do you make it gender sensitive? The CVE, countering violent extremism, or the role of women. Prosecution, rehabilitation, and reintegration. Prosecution, rehabilitation, and reintegration. These are the three important pertinent points. Now, when you prosecute, you kind of identify. Then there is the process of rehabilitation. You have to rehabilitate. Then you have to reintegrate them again into the normal scenario, right? Now, so when now this is an interesting area for students who really want to work on peace, conflicts, peace zone, and peace solutions and conflict zones. You should look into this. There are a lot of people who are working with the United Nations, with various other NGOs also in conflict zones. So there is one very important thing that goes with women and subjugation and their role. This is called the sex slavery, right? The sex slavery is one of the greatest problem in Iran. If ISIS comes and declares that we are, we are the savior of Islam or whatever, they have their own concepts. But the greatest victim are the women. They take women as slaves. Women are the most vulnerable, and children also. If you see in the Talibanization also in any region, Syria, Yemen, even if you see in history also, if you go back in history also, if there is any a conqueror coming, the first attack are the women and the children, the most vulnerable. So the sex slavery concept is very strong. Now, if you are into research, you need to concentrate on the local context. We have to check the local indices. We have to check the local index. If if I'm studying, if I'm trying to understand the Talibanization and the subjugation of women in the Talibanized area. So for me, I have to understand the local scenario. How much power is the local family and then local? How much power is the local culture, local tradition, local religion, local society giving to women? Because why you given to I mean, women are exchanged as commodities, as they just get there. If you see history, they get married, they have to burn themselves, they have to commit. The concept of izzat, the concept of respect is just on our shoulder. So you have to look into the local indices. You have to look into the local contents if you want to really look into the solution. United Nations is a very later, concept, or at a state level, it's a later concept. But local indices and local context is very important. In later in my talk, I will also give some examples where, in conflict zone, how local peace crusader women have made a change. Now, why this? Because women do groundbreaking work for justice, peace, security, but yet they seem to be sidelined in peace process. When there is any conflict happening, all the victimization is of women, and when there is peace, you don't find any women on the table of peace. You only find those turbans and those hats and those coats and suits and tuxedos. You don't find women anywhere on the table of peace talks. So that is very important. The most important declaration was the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in 1995. Okay, this Beijing Declaration called for action against terrorism or against extremism for women. It was in 1995. 80% of the refugees in the world, they constitute women and children. So every 100 refugee that is coming to your country, 80 of them are going to be women and children. So 80% of the refugee population in the world are women and children. Now, women's role is very crucial in times of armed conflict. When communities collapse, they act as and work to preserve the social order. कोई social order नहीं है, everything is collapsing, conflict is happening. Now, who is going to? It's the women. The women, they are the most important character in this, because they preserve the social order. They are given the responsibility always to take care of the society. The social order has to be preserved by the women. Now, women make an important but often unrecognizable contribution. So unknowingly, unrecognizably, it's not been recognized, their contribution is not being recognized, but they are making a contribution as peace educators. Peace educators, they are the people they don't know what they're doing. They don't know that they're doing this work, but they're doing it unknowingly. And where? In both in families as well as in societies. Now, to enhance this unknowing quality of the gender, we need to have an institutional mechanism for the advancement of women. We need institutional advancement, like the Northeast Society. We are here sitting and talking about this. So there is an institutionalization of the concept, and we are talking, we are deliberating, we are discussing. So this need to be institutionalized. It needs to be recognized. Peace studies, gender studies. Some years back there was nothing like gender studies. Now it's such an important area of study. We need to have institutional mechanism for women. Now I'll just quickly go with the statistics, which is very important. Between 1992 and 2018, as peace negotiators, okay, between 1992 and 2018, we were only 13% of negotiators. Whatever peace talks were held between 1992 and 2018, 13% negotiators of these, or intercullators as you call them, the women were only 13%. And 3% only mediators. There were only 3% mediators. And when it was signed on the table, the peace treaties or the peace pact or whatever you can call it, after the negotiation and mediation and everything, the signatories had only 4% women. This is a worldwide data that I'm giving you. Now, there are some, I mean, these statistics just leave some questions to be answered for us to think and understand and analyze. Front lines of countries in conflict, we have women peace builders. There are some countries, uh, if you see Iraq, uh, you see that it was the women there, the Kurdish women. They gave a fight to the ISIS and they fought with them. I had written an article. I write a column in largest Urdu daily. My reason for writing in Urdu daily is to convey certain issues that are never spoken of. So in that I wrote about, I just dedicated my one column to these Kurdish women fighters who are giving head on with the extremist terrorists there. It's so difficult. You can't even imagine the scenario, how it is, how that country is, and what is the scenario over there. So in some countries, frontline fighters are women. They are taking head on with them, and they are also peace builders. Women leading efforts in Syria. I'll just give you quick some examples. There is this lady called Raja Al Tali. She is leading certain peacekeeping programs in Syria. It's very important to include young women's inclusion in peace building. It will create a sustainable peace. So we need. It's not that, okay, I'm retiring, I'm old now, I don't have anything to do, so I'm going to fight for peace. No, we need young women. We need young women to come ahead and fight for peace. And it's not just that you have to go to some conflict zone and fight. You can do that in the very place where you are, with your views, with your work, with your perception, with your behavior. So for a sustainable peace, sustainable goals ki hum baat karte, we talk about sustainable goals. So for a sustainable peace, we need to have more young women coming. Now, there's this lawyer from Sudan, South Sudan, Susan Sebit. You want me to write down the name? I can write down. Susan Sebit. She's from South Sudan. She's a lawyer. She's fighting. She's working in this area. Then I don't know if you've heard of Kosovo. Kosovo is also another zone where women are treated really bad. There is this lady Drita Haidari. She's fighting against sexual violence, and there is an interesting story about a woman in Yemen. She sells samosas, and she has a small tea stall. And I just read a story of hers. She thinks that she's very empowered because she is now able to have some financial sustainability of everything. After losing everything, she's able to take care of her children. It's a very interesting story. It's Nouria. She supports her family, and she thinks that she's been able to contribute. So even a little effort in these difficult situations has to be accepted. There are almost 2 million Syrian refugees in the world. 2 million Syrian refugees, as per data or statistics. I'm sure there might be more. And 75% of them are women. Can you imagine? 75% refugees, they are women. Okay. Now, I'll just tell you a quote about what Noor Umar says. She says, "I've healed the wounds of war and feel more confident about my future." She's talking about healing her wounds, the wounds that she was inflicted, and she's more confident about her future. So that kind of, you need that kind of approach. There is this group in Yemen. It's called the Sada group. They kind of approach conflict zone women, and they give them that psychological and mental support. Now, I think, how much time do I have, Aching?
Take your time.
Okay, I'll just, yeah. So, coming to peacekeeping forces also. When I visited the United Nations, there was this gallery which had peacekeeping forces, and I was so happy to see that our Indian contingent, it is the largest women peacekeeping forces that was displayed there. And I remember, I think there was this Italian woman, she was there standing next to me. And I was wearing a bindi, and also she said, "Oh, it's India. Is she the Indian? Indian women fight the army?" I said, "Yes, of course." So then I had to explain. So the role of peacekeeping forces is also important. So most of the United Nations peacekeeping forces, you have women. Now, Major General Christine End of Norway. She was appointed as the first female to serve as post commander in a United Nations peacekeeping operation in Cyprus. So the first women commander of an international UN peacekeeping force was Major General Christine Lund. She was from Norway. Okay, and at present, 30% of the peacekeeping missions are women all over the world, the United Peacekeeping Forces. Now, the next concept that I come to discuss is gender sensitive language in peace agreement. It's very important. When you have a peace agreement, you have to have a gender sensitive language in the peace negotiation, in the peace agreements. Now, this is the general concept of an international concept. Now, coming to our Indian context, I will briefly touch on the Indian context, and I'm sure my friends here would be having more knowledge of it who are from Northeast, because Northeast is the greatest example where women have contributed a lot in peacekeeping and being negotiators and being and helping in having a peaceful zone. So, in Indian context, if you see the Naga peace talks, the Naga Mothers Association, they have been very strong, and they have in 1994, I think it was formed, and it was a peace team. It was formed as a peace team, and their motto was "Shed no more blood." So these women, these Naga women, and the peace team, their motto was "Shed no more blood." And they have resolved economic blockade also in 2016. So there is an entire study, if students who are interested, they can do about mothers' intervention as peace activists. You know, what is the role of mother? I was just going through a research paper of the Israeli Arab-Israel conflict. So this is at John Jay College, New York. I had a session when I visited. That's Professor Shuki Cohen. He has worked on these suicide bombers, you know. So, you know that the last letter that they write is they write to their mothers. The last letter a suicide bomber writes is they write to their mothers. So, how important is the role of mother? So, how important a mother can be in, kind of counseling and kind of supporting an individual kid. So, mother's intervention as peace activist is very important, and it's always believed that peace building is a beat between anger and joy. It's a beat between anger and joy. How you try to beat between the anger and the joy that you have, and how you walk towards the peace. Now, we we also come across the same perspective in Kashmir. So obviously, when we are talking about extremism, we cannot leave Kashmir. Now, Kashmir is a very sensitive issue, and it has been found that in Kashmir also the role of women and the role of mothers are very important in creating peace and a peaceful scenario over there. Now, coming back to my point that I was making about the local indices, the local social indices is very important. World peace ki to baat, we'll speak later, but how important is the local indices? Similarly, mm, there, if you see Balochistan, Kashmir, people talk about Kashmir, but Balochistan, which is also, it's a big hub for atrocities of women. The Baloch women, most some of them who are, activists, and they are mostly in exile. They're not living there. They are living in Canada or some other countries, and they're fighting. They're giving a fight to their, cause for peace. Now, we still have my firm belief is that when we talk about women as peace builders, or women as solution and empowered solution to peace, or countering violent extremism, it is very important that we look beyond borders. And I was very lucky to meet at least 21. I represented India, and there were other 21 countries like Burkina Faso. I met a lady from there who has all the threat every time, but she's fighting against extremism. And Nigeria, there was a pastor friend of mine from Nigeria who does these interreligious congregation, and they fight also, but they try to bring about solution. That is the whole idea. So there has to be a cross border or beyond borders. We have to look beyond borders if women have to come into the main scenario of peace. Now, and it's very important to have a gendered narrative. You have to have a gendered narrative of conflict which is there, because if you're not going to have a gendered narrative conflict, you're not going to have a solution to that. War is an absolute human right violation. War is never a solution. It's a human right violation, and I also call it as privatization of violence. There is privatization of violence, and the extreme forces pick up, and they kind of they kind of privatize their ideologies, their extreme thoughts, and that leads to extremism and violence. Okay, now there is an important United Nations Security Council resolution, which is the number is 1325. You can look up. Okay, the United Nations Security Resolution. This is on women, peace, and security. It came in 2000, and I'll just conclude after this gender-sensitive mediation. Now, what is gender-sensitive mediation? And then I'll just give you some references where you students can go read and have a deeper look into the problem. Gender-sensitive mediation. Gender-sensitive mediation. Ensuring women's participation, bringing women's perspective, understanding cause of conflict, peace agreement that are responsive to needs of women. Okay, जैसे in medieval ages we had peace. Okay, the peace talk was between two male heads of the princely state. Okay, I want your daughter in marriage. You give me your daughter in marriage, and I'm going to have peace with you. There was no dialogue with the daughter. There's no dialogue with the women. The prestige of the royalty is sustained how? Okay, if there is an attack of the opposite ruler, and they come and they take over the fort, you all go and jump in the fire. You have to die for the dignity of men, for the dignity of society. So see, you need to change these concepts. You need to change the concept, and you need to have a gender responsive solution. And this is not just our country, or this is not just Southeast Asia. This is in most of the regions. The concept of morality and the concept of what do you say, the status, and the concept of respect for a particular society. In these matters, our indigenous society are far developed. They have the women in the tribal regions, in the indigenous society, they have far say, they have more contribution. Like I visited a Red Indian village, and I want to share this experience with you students, because then you will know that how we should appreciate diversity and differences. There was this small, in the mountains we were driving, and there was this small kind of a small tent. So I asked the driver, I said, yeah, this is a local Red Indian women village market. So I said, please stop. I just want to go and, have a look and see. So there were these local American indigenous women, and they have these small markets. And can you believe it, friends, when I went and I spoke, and then she asked, which country? I said, India. Her face, it just it just sparked, and she just showed up her arm, and she said, see, we are same color, we are same color. This is, Grand Canyon, this is Arizona I'm talking about, and I am in New Delhi, and when I go there, I get this kind of response. So what I'm trying to say is that we need that connect, we need that kind of connect. And all these women were great business they were doing. They were selling the indigenous crafts, jewelries, and etc. And you know why they were doing this? Women whom I met, she said, I am supporting my niece who is a national level shooter. So see, why I narrated this entire story is that how the empowerment connects. If one woman gets empowered, how she empowers and how the narrative changes. She's not she's not funding it for any other wrong this thing, but she's funding it for the empowerment of her niece, who is an able shooter and who needs more funding. So what I'm trying to say is that kind of connectivity of gender narrative is very important, and that is why I always say that we women should lift each other up, and we should respect our differences. And why just women? We should respect our differences. When we are going to catch that point, it's really. And this incident had touched me so much, and I have narrated it in so many places. What I'm trying to say is, the more you get advanced, the more you get corrupt. So your advancement is your thought, how you're going to give it for the betterment of or the service of humanity. Anyway, so that's my kind of approach. So I thought I should share it with the students, since we have students here. So uh, we ask for comment on women issues, and women are not just voices, we are agents. So even if you see most of the women organization and all, they just make comment, okay, we just condemn, हमने इसका तिरस्कार किया, हमने कड़ी निंदा की. We don't just need condemnation, we need some action. So the role of women in action process is very important. So for that we need to have a gender narrative added to it. Like I told you about the UNSCR report, 31st October, victims are more women. If victims are more in extremism and any kind of situation, then why do we have less women as peace agents? So we need to increase that. Now, I'll just quote. I will just read one of the statement in the UNSCR 31st October 2000 when it was there, and then I'll just conclude. It says, the UNSCR 31st October 1325 resolution of the United Nations Security Council, it says, it expressed its willingness to incorporate a gender perspective into peacekeeping operations and urges the Secretary General to ensure that where appropriate, field operations include the gender component. Now, this is, you see the words, they're very tricky. Express its willingness to incorporate a gender perspective into peacekeeping operations. So you have to have a gender perspective in peacekeeping operations. Okay, so this is the UN Security Council resolution number 1325. It's available on www.un.org. It was passed in New York, and I'll just share some references before I conclude. There is this book by David Cook, Women Fighting in Jihad, Studies in Conflict and Terrorism, 2005. Okay, these are the references that I have. David Cook, Women Fighting in Jihad, Studies in Conflict and Terrorism. Then there is an interesting, I'm sure some of my friends must have read this. This is by an article by Rita Manchanda. It talks about women in the Kashmir conflict. The title is Guns and Burqa. The title of the article by Rita Manchanda is Guns and Burqa. And there is this article by Lakshmi Subramaniam, Kurdish women fighters. It's about, this is an EPW section. And there is so these are the points that I was trying to make. And before I conclude, I would want to just touch upon the great onslaught of Talibanization. My problem is the Talibanized thought. It's the thought. See, anything happens anywhere, you see the kind of reactions you get. So somewhere down the line, if there are people who are opposing, there are people who are supporting. So you have that kind of thought. Talibans are there, but they are pretty sure, they know that they have that kind of support. So the the thought is very important. We need to crack that thought and take head on that thought. The recent two, three developments I would just talk about, that the outgoing UN Women's Agency head, uh, she talks about the contribution. There's been only 40 billion US dollar contribution to women issues or to promote gender equality, all worldwide. She has already given her report. In her report, before signing off as the head of the UN Women's Agency, she says that there is not having adequate resources equal to the size of problem. I will conclude on this only what she said. Not having adequate resources equal to the size of problem. And I give my salute to all those women, all those activists, and all my men friends also who are standing together with these women, who are giving head on and who are fighting with any kind of extremist views, extremist thought, and extremist action. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mubin ma'am, for sharing your rich experience and your knowledge on the subject. And we are very honored and privileged to have heard you speak on such important and crucial topic. And I'm sure some of the students must have thought about what they can do, what they can contribute to the family and to the society. I'm sure some must have already started at a grassroots level, local level, like ma'am has said. And it's not enough only to unpack all the nuanced narratives surrounding women as peacekeeping forces. So in later talks, we hope to have Mubin ma'am come again and then explore avenues. I'm reminded when ma'am was talking about quoting some of the quotes and how important it is for women to be involved in it and to be right up there. Women are involved in it, but they are not right up there. And I remember this quote by Khalid Hosseini because of the Afghan situation.
Yes.
Now I'm rereading him, and he had written in A Thousand Splendid Suns that yeah, he said, I quote, "A man's heart is a wretched, wretched thing. It isn't like a mother's womb. It won't bleed. It won't stretch to make room for you. You know, it won't stretch to make room for you like a mother's womb." And so there is terror, there is violence, but the healing has to start from the womb again, from women, from what comes from women. And so I would like to give us the opportunity for the attendees to ask some questions. I see some here, and we have one from Moshmi. Yeah, I'll read it out for you. Mubin, this is such an in-depth analysis of women and conflict. However, my query is, how do we address the discomfort of approaching gender-sensitive issues from within largely patriarchal setups?
Thank you, Mosby. I think you've really banged on the issue when you say discomfort of approaching gender sensitive issues from within largely patriarchal setups. See, it's a struggle. It's a big struggle. But when you say discomfort of approaching gender sensitive issues, it's apparent that it's not an easy task. There is a kind of a discomfort. But we can, if I want to just simplify and say this, Moshmi, it's I think we have to have more efforts than just identifying the problems. We have to work more hours. We have to give more hours for working on these gender sensitive issues. And I think we have to start with the upbringing also. We have to start with the upbringing of your children, for the upbringing of our youth. That's why I said that, and that this is also one of the UN observation, that we need more youngsters in peacekeeping situations, and more people fighting for peace. And you know, it's always let me just simplify and say that we need more effort and we need more contribution. It's not just that, some activist or someone who's there, he or she's taking up the charges, but we as individual in our own capacity, we need to be vocal about it, to fight about it. And like I said, institutionalization also, we need to recognize this, and we need to have an institutionalization of gender sensitivity. And the narrative has to have a gender perspective also. Um, it's I think it's a macro effort that we all need to do, and as educators our role is more important. But it's really sad at times that the known mind is more arrogant towards the issue. So yes, it's not an easy task, as you say, like you already said, the discomfort, it's there, but yes, we'll fight it out.
Thank you so much. And we have another one from Ritika. How privatization of beauty and privatization of feminism is changing feminism in changing society?
This is Ritika, this is very interesting. When you say privatization of beauty and privatization of feminism, it explains that nothing is in our hand. Our beauty is also, privatized. Everything that women owns is decided and owned by the society. So, coming to your question, that how privatization of beauty and privatization of feminism is changing the society. Uh, well. I'll tell you my personal view. I personally feel that every person can give a voice to the issue. So why not? If someone who's in the business of beauty, if that person is giving a voice to the issue, so I would appreciate it. Like the recent statement of Angelina Jolie. I think she was the first actress who just spoke against Taliban with the recent development. Can you tell me any other celebrity who's talking about it? So, uh, beauty and privatization of, I mean, if I am understanding your question, I feel that for me, the issue being taken up and talking about and fighting about the issue, I think I will welcome it. I will not compartmentalize my view on accepting or not, because this is a very big war. It's a very difficult war. That's why I said we have to start at the local level also. We have to look at a major level also. So it's the hierarchy is not an easy to break. But yes, uh, privatization of beauty and privatization of feminism changing society. I mean, I would not like anybody privatizing my concept of beauty. So I have my own personal concept of beauty, but I would love to appreciate if somebody is working on this issue. Yeah.
And the next one is by Rashmi ma'am. What can be the active role of women in the metropolitan cities as peace builders, especially in the Indian context?
बिल्कुल, बहुत बहुत अच्छा सवाल किया मैम आपने, क्योंकि मैंने ये देखा है, मैंने ये ऑब्जर्व किया है कि as we as we grow, as we get empowered also, uh, there have been instances where even the women, they become more violent in their behavior, and sometimes that behavior is equated to empowerment, or you can say freedom. It's not like that. It's not like that. A violent behavior is not gender specific. Violence is wrong. Violence is condemnable. Anybody. आपका जो सवाल है मैम कि what can be the active role of women in the metropolitan cities as peace builders, especially in the Indian context. पहले तो मैम मेट्रोपॉलिटन सिटीज में ये इशू इतना है नहीं पीस बिल्डिंग का, पहली बात तो ये है. और अगर आप इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ले, जैसा मैंने कश्मीर का एग्जांपल दिया, मैंने नॉर्थ ईस्ट का एग्जांपल दिया, Shivani ma'am is here. Shivani ma'am knows there's this book by Teresa Rahman, her friend also a scholar. She has written a book, Mothers of Manipur. It's very interesting book. You all must read. And there is another book she has written about journalist, as a women journalist working in conflict zone. So in Indian context, सबसे पहले तो अगर आप इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट की बात करें तो वी नीड मोर वुमेन इन द पॉलिटिकल सिनेरियो, है ना. We need more women because our Indian scene is more dominated by political changes. So चाहे मैं कहती हूँ कोई भी पार्टी हो, any political party, we need more women, and we need right thinking women who think not the right and left wala right, but what I mean to say is the gender narrative wala right. So you have to have that kind of women. And मेट्रोपॉलिटन सिटी में ये इतना इशू, पीस बिल्डिंग इशू नहीं है, लेकिन इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में अगर आप देखें कई जोन्स हैं. जैसे महाराष्ट्र में अगर आप देखें तो महाराष्ट्र में जो अल्कोहल के अगेंस्ट जो एक मूवमेंट था, औरतों ने, द वुमेन दे carried that movement and they were able to kind of control alcoholism there, you know. So बहुत सारे एग्जाम्पल्स हैं जहाँ महिलाओं ने अपना योगदान दिया है. अगर आप पार्टीशन की बात करें, I always look back in history since I'm a historian. So if you see the partition of India into India and Pakistan, there has been great contribution by women. Literature है कितना जो बताता है कि despite facing all the problems and all the things that they had to face, still they worked for peace. तो हम अपने आप से ही शुरुआत करें. मैं और रश्मि मैम हम दोनों मिलके कोशिश करें हम अपने आसपास जितना पीस बना सकें. Thank you for the question, Rashmi ma'am. Very important question.
Thank you. We had Teresa Rahman also come over for our talk.
Yeah.
And if some of the students are interested to read all those, get in touch with the student leaders. We will make a list of the books Mubin ma'am had mentioned, and along with some other books, and you can read it up. Okay, please get in touch. And the next one is from Yompe. How do we come up with solutions for gender equality under a tribal patriarchal society where preserving tribal culture clashes with women's rights?
Oh, that's an interesting Yompe question. How do we come up with solutions for gender equality under a tribal patriarchal society where preserving tribal culture clashes with women's rights? All these questions is an insight that everywhere there is gender disparity, be it a tribal society, be it a metropolitan, be it international scenario. You simply say no. You simply don't accept. You simply don't accept anything that is coming in your empowerment and your development. And let me tell you, you need to also convey that the empowerment of a woman of a particular society or a particular sect or a particular section is also an empowerment of that sect, that organization, that society, that family. So maybe, you just shed the prejudice, because my personal space is my personal space. I don't accept anything in that for my personal development or my personal space. So maybe you need to start right there. But see, in doing so, you would be empowered. But when you're going to take up the issue at the macro level, where you're going to explain things, where you're going to work on it, I'm sure times are changing and there are people who will come and stand with you, and the communities are shedding misconception. If there are extreme voices against it, there are voices that are supporting also. So maybe we can try and garner support also if we want to go ahead and have it as a more sustainable goal. That's what I would say, Yompe.
Thank you. And there are some appreciation for the talk as well from Dr. G. Shivana. Thank you for putting that in. Next, we have another one from Shivani ma'am. Do you think that some forms of resistance are given more importance and some aren't even acknowledged as resistance, that there is a mainstreaming of resistance as well?
Absolutely, Shibani. Absolutely, absolutely. I agree to this. Shibani, this is the problem. Like, I'll give you an example. Uh, in Syria and in Iraq, I mean, Indian context also, it's very apparent. We know that some resistance are given highlight, and some are just, you know, brushed, and this is not important on the basis of several political issues. We all know that. I don't want to get into that. Uh, yes, this is there. That's why I was saying that we need more representation. We need more political representation. I don't see any women leader apart from activists coming from Northeast. We need more women parliamentarians from Northeast. We need more women parliamentarians from Kashmir. We need more women parliamentarians from zones. So, women participation in political representation is very important. You know, there are these two perspectives. Women owning land goes a long way. So, property and landed property owned by women goes a long way. That is very important. And political participation is very important. So, if you see any movement, national movement, you have women performing all the jhanda leke, all the this thing. But that's why the on the table, you hardly, I gave you those statistics in peace building, there's hardly any representations of women. So we need more political representations of women. We need more women lawyers. We need more women business women, and finance is a very important. So every woman should be financially independent. It's very important. I hope that answers the question. But I agree with what Shibani ma'am is saying, that definitely some form of resistance are given more importance, and some aren't even acknowledged. So that can only be acknowledged, or that can only be given a picture. And in today's context with social media and media, obviously there is this Balochistan activist who's residing in Canada, but she's giving voices, she's giving lectures, she's talking about the atrocities, what is happening with women in Balochistan. That's very important. So I think, rather than taking a back seat and not talking about it, but in a peaceful manner, in a manner that is accepted and your voice is heard, I think we can do that by having an academic representation, by empowering yourself. I think that's very important. But I agree with you what you say. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think it will be a very interesting topic for another talk, to see why there were less women representing, or
Yes.
there are still less women representing.
Definitely.
And if they are willing to, or whether they were allowed to or not allowed to, like for future talks, we will keep it, and it will be very interesting to explore more of that. And thank you so much for.
It's my pleasure.
I know you are really busy these days because of the program in our college also, but thank you so much for taking time out to come and give us this crucial talk, and it's yeah, a really very informative, insightful, and interesting talk. We hope to have you in the future. And now I would like to call upon Nimalini Marangtham, ma'am, to give the vote of thanks for this program.
Thank you, ma'am. It's a great honor and privilege for me to give the vote of thanks in this special program. First of all, I, on behalf of the Northeast Welfare Committee, would like to express my gratitude to our principal, Professor Gantos Kumar Jha, for his untiring support and encouragement to our society. It is because of his support and encouragement that our committee could organize different kinds of programs like the Rainbow Fest, orientation, talks, movie screening, and many more events successfully since 2015. I would like to extend my gratitude to our today's speaker, Dr. Said Mubin Zehra from the Department of History at RSD College for taking up her valuable time for us. Ma'am, you have shared a wonderful and interesting insights, which we are really inspired and motivated by your talk. I would like to thank all my colleagues and members of this committee, especially Dr. Achinlu Kamai, Dr. Premjit Singh, Dr. Sivani Fukan, Dr. Pinky Roy for their kind cooperation. Also, I would like to thank the students who helped in making this program a great success. And lastly, but not the least, I would like to thank all our colleagues from our college and from other colleges as well. Thank you all for attending the program and making a successful one. We look forward to the next one. And lastly, thanking you all.
Thank you so much. It was an extreme pleasure for me, and I hope I have kindled some issues. And just to conclude, let us all come out of our comfort zone and just do our bit. Maybe in our own very own way. So yeah, thank you all of you. Thank you, Achinglu. I would like to thank you, the Northeast
Uh,
Committee, and thank you so much, all of you.